Hello again, and welcome to Deviant History. In February 1963, the last Iranian monarch, Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, organized a vote. There was only one question: do you support the program of reforms? Since many poor Iranians could not read nor write, they were offered the choice of one of two ballot papers, a white one or a blue one. Savak, the Shah's security service, observed the voting. It was no problem to figure out who voted for and against the reforms. According to official data, 99.9% of the voters supported the program. This program was called the White Revolution of the Shah and the Nation. The goal was to modernize Iranian economy and make the country a significant political power in the world. This was also the time when the Iranian nuclear program was established. As part of the White Revolution, the Shah demolished the parliament, which had become the real power in the 1950s, and often was in opposition to the monarch. Both socialists supported by the Soviet Union and the liberals were purged. The Shah himself declared that the entire nation supported his course, and the few people who did not would be allowed to leave the country. However, many people ended up in prison. Shapur Bakhtiar, who eventually played a dramatic role in the Second Revolution, was among the political prisoners, spending 6 years in prison. The Shah then swooped down upon the displeased Shia Muslim clerics. Unlike in the Sunni Islamic tradition, the monarchy in Shia Iran was not sacralized, so any ruler had to pay attention to the clerics who did not regard the ruler as having complete legal power. They were the traditional opposition to the monarchs, and a very strong one, because the daily life in Iran was regulated by religion. In 1963, the Shah got into an implacable conflict with senior Shia scholars, represented by the 61-year-old Ayatollah Khomeini, who criticized the reforms and said that they were actually an attack on the traditional values. Khomeini was dissatisfied with the suffrage given by the Shah to women and the spread of European-style clothing among them. The land reform, which was a part of the White Revolution program, was denounced since it would redistribute the lands owned by the Shia institutions. Finally, Khomeini criticized the Shah himself as the political puppet driven by the USA and Israel. In response, Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi dispatched the army to Qom, the sacred Shia town located 87 miles from Tehran. Khomeini was detained there and spent several months under house arrest. Unlike many others who opposed him, Pahlavi did not risk imprisoning Khomeini or torturing him. After his release, the Ayatollah continued opposing the Shah. He also condemned the diplomatic immunity given to the invited American military specialists by the Shah. Finally, Khomeini was expelled and for the next 14 years lived abroad in exile. Ideas of the American political scientist Samuel Huntington were pretty popular at the Shah's court. Huntington supposed that modernization of a Middle East country could be successful under strong, consolidated political power only. Mohammad Reza definitely saw himself as a ruler of this type and saw oil exports as the source of financing for his plan. Journalists from the West were charmed by the Shah's economic policy and began calling Iran the Japan of the Middle East. Meanwhile, Khomeini said that one day Iranians would be happy to see the Shah leaving their country. These words became prophetic. The Shah tried to modernize Iran, but did actually nothing to change the political system, which stayed completely corrupted and ineffective. The officials became richer, while the general population had a lot of problems and remained impoverished. Khomeini professionally used that in his propaganda and spread the ideas in Iran despite the ban. The Shah spent oil dollars to finance his programs, but with little results. The aristocrats were not fond of the land reform. It presupposed the buyout of their lands by the government, and then the transfer of those lands to the poor farmers on preferential terms. It was much too easy for the wealthy landlords to bribe an official to keep their property untouchable. The literacy campaign was irritating the religious conservatives for two reasons. Firstly, because it destroyed their traditional monopoly on education, and secondly, the campaign was mostly provided by female teachers who, at the same time, served as soldiers. The Shah quickly got rid of any legal opposition. That made receiving any feedback on the reforms impossible, and any discussion on the subject was stopped. Aspiring to absolute power, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi lost his touch with reality. The government became literally blind and could not see the general situation. Continuing to follow his chosen course, the Shah in 1975 declared the loyal Rastakis Party as the only legal political party in Iran. Rastakis occupied all the places in both chambers of the parliament, making it the submissive provider of the Shah's decisions. In this way, the Shah violated the Iranian constitution. Khomeini took advantage of the fact immediately in his political struggle. He also capitalized on another decision made by the Shah 4 years before, and that decision had been very unpopular. It seems the Shah had organized a luxury celebration at the ruins of Persepolis, the former capital of the Persian Achaemenid Empire. Many foreign leaders were invited for the event, dedicated to the 2500th anniversary of Iranian monarchy. That was a symbol. The Shah gave a sign that the monarchy, and consequently his personal power, was based on the much more ancient tradition than Islam. Continuing his confrontation with the Muslim clerics, he changed the calendar that was based on Islamic tradition, and entered one marking the ascension to the throne of Cyrus the Great as the new starting point. The celebration was mostly remembered due to a different episode, though. Tons of extremely expensive sturgeon caviar were supplied to Persepolis at the time when several Iranian provinces were suffering drought and extreme famine. A few successes of the Shah's reforms, as well as Iran itself, were completely dependent on volatile oil prices. This finally caused severe inflation. The social unrest was initially suppressed with cruelty, but that only caused further destabilization. In this situation, Liberals and conservatives became as close in their demands as they had ever been before. The repressive machine was met by unarmed protesters, and the Shah's order to shoot at the crowd became the point of no return. The democratic governments asked the Shah to stop the bloodshed. President Jimmy Carter promised to suspend weapons sales to the regime, as well as suspend giving it new loans. Mohammad Reza had to soften his policy, but it was too late for the monarchy. Trying to save the monarchy, in January of 1979, the Shah appointed moderate Shapur Bakhtiar as the new prime minister. On January 16, 1979, the Shah boarded his plane with his family and left Iran forever. 2 weeks later, a Boeing 747 owned by Air France landed at the same airport, and Khomeini was back. The Shah's symbols, portraits, and statues were removed very quickly. The White Revolution was finished, and a different one had begun. The protesters did not accept Bakhtiar as prime minister, calling him a collaborator of the repressive regime, and he was forced to step down. Ironically, he fled to Paris, where Khomeini had left just a few weeks before. Bakhtiar was replaced by Mehdi Bazargan, the personal choice of the Ayatollah. Bakhtiar was found stabbed to death in his apartment in 1991. The last Shah of Iran died in exile in Egypt in July of 1980. The Ayatollah Khomeini died in June of 1989. This concludes this evening's episode of Deviant History. We hope you enjoyed it, and come back again next week. Please like us and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Until next time.